Election Day 2024 has arrived and the wait is over. Millions of Americans are heading towards polling stations to decide the future of the nation. The race to elect the 47th U.S. president is razor tight, with voters set to make a choice between Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. In a final appeal, Harris and Trump made their closing arguments to the American people, highlighting the sharp contrasts in their visions.
With your vote tomorrow, we can fix every single problem our country faces and lead America, indeed the world, to new heights of glory.
The momentum is on our side. Our campaign has tapped into the ambitions, the aspirations, and the dreams of the American people. And we know it is time for a new generation of leadership in America.
Harris has championed abortion rights and promised to lower food and housing costs for working families. Trump, on the other hand, has vowed to secure the border and proposed massive tax cuts to stimulate the economy. Polls show the race as a dead heat, with Trump vowing a triumphant return to the White House, while Kamala Harris declares momentum is, quote, on our side. Both candidates held last-minute rallies in crucial battleground states, with Harris finishing her campaign in Pennsylvania, rallying in Philadelphia at the iconic Rocky statue. Behind her, the backdrop of the Rocky Steps. Trump, who at 78 is the oldest nominee ever, closed his campaign in Grand Rapids, Michigan, accompanied by family members, though notably missing was his wife, Melania.
The ball's in our hand. All we have to do is get out the vote tomorrow. You get out the vote, they can't do anything about it. We win. Just so you know, if we show up, they can't win. They can't. They mathematically can't win because they're so far behind.
Voters in the U.S. hamlet of Dixville Notch launch Election Day with a tied vote mirroring the incredibly close national polls in the White House race. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump each got 3 ballots in the tiny community in the northeastern state of New Hampshire. As undecided voters hold the power to sway critical swing states, their votes will be pivotal in deciding the outcome. These voters, a mix of sporadic voters, disenchanted partisans, and independents, could tip the scale in states like Pennsylvania and Georgia. With over 82 million Americans already having cast early ballots, turnout is record-breaking. As polling stations buzz with activity, the nation holds its breath, knowing that today's decision could fundamentally reshape America's trajectory and send ripples across the global political landscape. Okay, on the broadcast now, we are being joined by Voice of America correspondent Jessica Stone, who's joining us from Arlington, Virginia. We are also being joined by Corinne Clark, Republican strategist from Washington, D.C., and Democratic strategist Nicole Brenner-Schmidt from Washington, D.C. as well. Welcome to all of you to WION's special broadcast for election 2024. I'd like to start with you, Jessica. How are the vibes in Virginia where you are, and what's the latest from the ground?
Well, the latest from the ground is that the polling location here in Arlington has been open for about 2 hours and a half, and we've had a steady stream of voters. I asked the voters who are walking out how long the wait is. It's just been about a 10-minute wait, so not really that bad. There was a group of about 60 people waiting to vote at 6 a.m. when the polls opened, which was an indication certainly of people wanting to get their day started by doing their civic duty. But here in Northern Virginia in particular, it's pretty blue. I mean, Harris is running 6 points ahead of Trump here across the state. And here in Northern Virginia, this area tends to go Democratic. And if I can have my photographer friend here, Chenny, pan over, you can just see an indication of that. The signs behind me are all Democrat elected officials or people running for office. In fact, you see no evidence of any Trump signs there at all. So that gives you some indication of the types of voices you're hearing here in Arlington, Virginia. And over here some of the people that are getting out the vote are working for the Harris-Walz campaign, but they, of course, have to stay a certain number of feet back from the actual polling location. So the vibes here in Northern Virginia, pretty nervous about the election outcome, unlike Washington, D.C., where there are a lot of boarded up areas. We're not seeing that here, but there's certainly a lot of attention on the campaign. Of course, many people in Northern Virginia work in politics or policy or for the defense industrial complex. So their jobs may well be on the line depending on what happens with the election results. Back to you.
And how do you see the last minute campaign pitches from the former president and Kamala Harris?
Well, we know that Kamala Harris is ending with a very upbeat, positive message of looking forward, turning the page, really running against the idea of a Trump return to the White House being negative. But she is using positive language about that, not laying out a ton of policy campaign proposals, but just talking about the change that she would bring to leadership, not really acknowledging the fact that she's already been in office over 3.5 years as it stands now and had the impact to create some of that change as vice president. For Trump's part, he is focusing on pretty negative criticism of his opponent, focusing on the impact on immigration and on the economy. Those are his strongest issues, according to the electorate, and two of the strongest issues that people are coming to the polls to vote on. But depending on whether they think that the economy or the immigration system is working, really depends on whether they'll support Donald Trump at the polls.
Thank you so much for all of those updates. I know we'll be speaking to you throughout the day and tomorrow as well. We'll be watching very closely, and I know you will as well. Thank you. All right, let's go straight to our guest, Ms. Corinne Clark, and Democrat strategist Nicole Brenner-Schmidt. Thank you to you both for joining us once again. I'd like to start with you, Ms. Clark. How different is this election year for the Republicans?
Well, it is different already because the early vote turnout for Republicans is higher than it's ever been. It hasn't really been a Republican strategy in the past to push an early vote. We're usually election day voters. But the numbers that we're seeing coming in right now suggest that voter turnout for Republicans is very high, and it's very high for early voting. So I think we're going to see a high voter turnout overall. So that is a huge difference. And I'm excited to see the results of that.
Brenner, I want to ask you the same. How is this election season different for the Democrats?
Are motivated, excited, and I agree with what Corinne just said. I mean, we are going to have an exceptionally high voter turnout, which is exciting because we really want everyone to participate in our democracy and get down to the ballots and get their vote in. But we're also going to see possibly a historic and the largest gender gap in voting that we've ever seen. We're really seeing women turn out in incredibly high numbers and break for Kamala Harris across race, across economics, in a way that we haven't seen before. So I think we're really going to be looking at the women vote and the impact of that, and have a historic nice night on the gender gap.
Going back to Corinne, what do you make of all the poll predictions? Some projections show that obviously there's a tight race between the two candidates. Others, on and off, we see these really wide margins here and there. How predictable are these polls, in your opinion?
I think it's difficult to trust the polls given the last few elections. Republicans are historically difficult to poll. They don't answer polls, so that leads to a bias accidentally, not because the pollsters have any malicious intent, but just because they don't have Republicans to poll. I think we've seen very close polls this election. There's a huge difference in how we're seeing the numbers break for Trump this time, because historically he outperformed the polls in 2020. He outperformed the polls in 2016 when he won. So to see him ahead is something that we have never seen. I don't think that people put a lot of weight in those, though, because they are just not that trustworthy. I think we're putting a lot of weight in the women vote this year, and I think Nicole is right. There's a lot of participation from women, but we see the media taking that as a direct win for for Harris. And I don't think that we're going to see that. I think we're underestimating the conservative woman, the angry mom, the motivated mom vote is going to be big this year. And I think we'll see those break for Trump a lot more than the media is giving him credit for.
And Nicole, if I could go back to you, there's a lot of talk about how Republicans have voted early, perhaps a lot more than previous years. What are your thoughts about this early voting pattern that we're hearing right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's absolutely correct. And we've seen it in what Corinne said, like they've typically voted on election day. I think their party has encouraged that. I think, unfortunately, even Donald Trump and some folks have even been critical of mail and early vote. But it seems that they've realized that this is something that they should also encourage their base and their voters to participate in. I mean, look, here's the reality. Election day can come with situations. You have a meeting that runs late, your kid gets sick, there's a storm, the lines are incredibly long. I mean, it is great to encourage and have voters participate in other ways. There are some states that are only mail in, there are drop boxes, there are states with, lengthy early vote periods where people can go and get that done. So I think it's great for both parties to be encouraging voters to do that, because if you wait till election day itself, you do run the risk that life happens and you don't want to be caught in a situation where you weren't able to get your vote in.
Yeah, that's such a valid point. And just this morning, as polls opened around 6 a.m., an hour later, we're hearing in Brooklyn that they're having some technical problems, and voters were pretty angry that they weren't able to cast their ballots. They were told to go and come back. So those issues are obviously an issue of concern as well. And, the narratives around that can just spiral out of hand, for lack of a better phrase. I do want to come back to you, Corinne. There is a lot of buzz about how Republicans may be taking back the Senate. What's going to happen on Capitol Hill, in your opinion? If you can look into your crystal ball and give us a picture.
Well, I think the Senate races might be even closer than the presidential race. Democrats are defending a lot of seats, and that gives Republicans a lot more opportunity to take the Senate than Democrats. They're just, even if they win all of their races, they're basically just maintaining the status quo. So the Republicans really have the upper hand here. But we are seeing, they're running in states in Ohio. Sherrod Brown has been around forever. Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin has been in office forever. There's a lot of trust there with Democrats. And I think that some of the base and new voters will just vote with those recognizable names. We may not take those Senate seats, even if Trump wins those states for the presidency. So I think we'll see some interesting split ticket voting in some of those Rust Belt states. I would love it if we took the Senate. That would be great to take the presidency and the White House. But I think we might see some interesting breakdown in those Senate races.
And Nicole, are you expecting any surprises from these swing states? I'd love to get your thoughts about Pennsylvania. How crucial is it for the former president and the vice president? They're closely matched in all poll predictions in that particular state. And I think it was only 2016 when Donald Trump was able to flip it. Pennsylvania usually votes blue. Where are we today, Pennsylvania and other swing states?
Yeah, I mean, you can't talk too much enough about how important Pennsylvania is. I mean, right now I'm in a hotel room in Philadelphia. It's critically important for both campaigns. And that's why you saw Vice President Harris spend her day yesterday going around the state, communicating with voters about what they care about and what their needs are. She spent yesterday in Allentown, in Scranton, in Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia, delivering that message of, affordable housing, healthcare for, seniors, having Medicare cover their in-home coverage, having the autonomy over your own body, talking about the economy and what her plans are, because these electoral votes of Pennsylvania are crucial. And it's an important state up and down the ballot. It's got a Senate race. It has multiple House seats that can have an effect on who controls the U.S. House of Representatives. So it's an incredibly important state, and I think eyes are going to be on it all night long because Pennsylvania, like Wisconsin, has not passed any legislation in their state legislatures that allow them to start counting ballots early. So we're going to be watching it into the wee hours of the night to see if we can get a grasp on who's winning.
And if I can come back to you, Corinne, there's been a lot of talk about tightened security measures in places like Washington. And it appears that at least the narrative is in a way that, they're getting prepared for a Trump loss. Do you agree with that? What are your thoughts on that? And how accurate is that assessment when we see these stores boarded up?
I would think that stores are actually preparing for a Trump win. We didn't see any riots with the Trump loss that were attacking businesses in Washington or in Washington State or in Washington, D.C., where they're boarding up all of their businesses. I know they're trying to make a lot of drama out of January 6th. That was a very targeted event. They're not businesses that were subject to violence. That's more of a leftist thing. We saw that through the BLM riots of summer 2020. I don't think that they're preparing for a Trump loss. I think that they are reading these polls and preparing for a Trump victory and worried that leftists will riot in their cities like they did in the summer of 2020.
And Nicole, your final thoughts on that. We do remember back in 2016, those marches of "Not My President" among Hillary Clinton supporters. And then, of course, we saw what happened in 2020 as well. What are your thoughts about these security measures? How accurate are the assessments?
I mean, look, the marches, as you said, were peaceful demonstrations. I guess these businesses feel that they're taking some precautions, but the only insurrection and riot I remember is a lot of MAGA folks attacking the Capitol. So I think that they're preparing for a possible Trump loss and a lot of anger around that.
All right. Well, thank you so much to you both for your thorough analysis. And I look forward to speaking to both of you again very soon. A very special day for us here in the United States. I appreciate you. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.